Hello and welcome to An Old Man Watches, and today I'm going to be talking about 1963 science fiction schlock, The Atomic Brain, also known as Monstrosity. And this film introduces us to the rather unethical Dr. Frank, who has discovered that radiation can be used to transfer minds between bodies. His initial tests put animal consciousness into human cadavers, but the ultimate goal is to transfer a human mind into a new body. Specifically, the human mind of his wealthy but elderly financier, Mrs. March, into the body of a much younger, preferably beautiful woman. Mrs. March sees Frank's research as a way for her to be young again, and to that end, she hires three young women as maids. These are the averagely pretty Anita, the above-average Nina, and the bombshell Beatrice. Surprise, surprise, poor Anita ends up as another animal brain experiment, while Beatrice, and her hysterically awful attempt at an English accent, is earmarked to be Mrs. March's new body. Even the best laid plans go awry, of course, and misfortune and double dealing will soon complicate things immensely for all involved. Who will survive? Who will end up as a cat in a human body? You're going to have to watch the film to find out, is basically the answer to that. The bigger question, of course, is whether you should watch the movie. Well, look, it's certainly true that this movie is utterly schlocky and that Beatrice's accent is truly, truly awful, even worse than the other accents. But I had fun with it nonetheless. So the answer to that question is maybe? I think it depends on your affection for dodgy 50s style B-movie science fiction. And 50 style is definitely apt in this case because despite being released in 1963, this film was actually made in 1958. So let's talk about what dodgy 1950s science fiction we have going on here. So first of all, once upon a time, atomic energy could do anything. Except kill you, of course. All you had to do to avoid that was to duck and cover. But yeah, atomic power and radiation were kind of a catch-all science fiction panacea throughout much of the 50s and into the early 60s, featuring in the origin of various giant monsters, most famously a certain lizard-like fellow from Japan, and also Marvel superheroes. The Hulk, Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, every single one of the X-Men owes their powers to radiation. And that was, likely because atomic power was a new and futuristic thing, and to a very real extent, people didn't know the limits of its capabilities. So it's not as odd as it might seem today to have a film where it can let you transplant consciousness. Today you'd be like, no, that's ridiculous. But back then, maybe not so much. Now that's, and we should remember that the practice of throwing out known but not well understood real-world scientific terms is still a thing in popular culture science fiction. The jargon has changed these days to stuff like reverse the tachyon flow. But at the end of the day, it's the same kind of nonsense that's being done. This is just an older, more amusing to our eyes version of the same kind of thing. Secondly, depending on your perspective, making a film about a scientist trying to extend life beyond death and then calling him Dr. Frank is either a nice nod to Mary Shelley's famous creation or it's rather on the nose. Or both. Because, the parallels with Dr. Frankenstein are pretty obvious here. In both cases, we have a mad genius looking to create a new form of life and using a new and little understood technology, electricity in the original, atomic power here, to achieve his goals. I mean, it would almost be more on the nose to not acknowledge the parallels. And there are differences as well. Of course, Dr. Frank here is working somewhat in the eagle role. He's not an independently wealthy nobleman, but a researcher beholden, however reluctantly, to the financial support of Mrs. March, who I'm surprised isn't named in a way that obviously calls back to Frankenstein. But, never mind that, her much younger male companion is named Victor, just to make sure we didn't miss the connection. And I kind of have to admire that brazen gumption. I assume it's brazen gumption. I mean, I guess it could be just complete coincidence, but no, it couldn't be, could it? And then finally, the gender politics of the film is quite interesting in some ways, particularly given that it's a film from nearly 60 years ago. In fact, more than 60 years ago from filming, nearly 60 years ago from release. Women seeking eternal youth and beauty is an ancient tradition in stories. We've got Cleopatra reputedly bathing in ass's milk. We've got Elizabeth Bathory being accused of bathing in maiden's blood. We've got the obsession of the evil queen from Snow White with her physical beauty, so on and so forth. It's a storytelling tradition with some very unfortunate connotations, suggesting the only thing a woman has of value is her physical attractiveness. And through the character of Mrs. Marsh, this film certainly buys into that unfortunate narrative. But to be fair to this film, it's far from flattering to the men in it either. Dr. Frank is vain and venal, and his resentment of being forced to work for a woman is ultimately a leading cause of his downfall. Mrs. Marsh's companion's Victor, meanwhile, is a gawping cretin. There's no heroic male in this story. Just, an unusual choice for the period, really. There's not, a central do-gooding man who saves the day. Ultimately, if they want to get out of this live, Nina and Beatrice are going to mostly have to rely on their own abilities and, to a great extent, the flaws of their adversaries. They're not going to have, a bunch of policemen run in and save the day for them or anything like that. That's, it's an interesting aspect to the film, particularly given its age. So that's The Atomic Brain. Next time, a very different film to the one we just discussed, critically acclaimed 2008 release, The Wrestler. But that'll be next time. In the meantime, thanks for watching this one. Hope you enjoyed it.